A child comes to the attention of authorities. He's 10 years old and he's never been to school. He can't read or do basic math. He has no immunization record. For whatever reason, his guardian never gave him these basic tools to become successful and healthy. Another child's parents are arrested for drug offenses. On further investigation, police discover this young girl has been living in squalor with no heat or electricity. Still another young person is trafficked for child prostitution. And the trafficking suspect is that child's own guardian. These hypothetical situations are all too real. They happen right here in Mohave County. When they do, the child victims go to foster care. But what happens next? Who stands up for these kids and helps them to learn they deserve better? What they've gone through is not normal, and we as a society will help them to find a better, safer life. The answer is a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate.
CASA volunteers are just really everyday citizens in Mohave County who are appointed by a judge to speak up for the abused and neglected children in our county.
That's Jenn Swapp. She's a coordinator for CASA of Mohave County. I'm TG LaFredo. This is Focus on Your Health. It's brought to you by Kingman Regional Medical Center in historic Kingman, Arizona. Today on the program, we're visiting with Jenn Swapp. We're learning about CASA of Mohave County, and we're presenting a call to action. We'll discuss how you can become involved and make a difference in the lives of young people. Jenn Swapp, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's so good to be here and good to be with you in this capacity.
Oh, thank you. I've really been looking forward to talking about your work and what you do and the ways in which you and your team are making differences in the lives of these young people. This CASA program exists in jurisdictions around the country. Do you know when it began?
Yes, it was started in 1977 in Seattle. There was a juvenile court judge there who was concerned about the drastic decisions he was making with relatively little information and how much that would impact these children forever. And he came up with the idea of citizen volunteers speaking up for the best interest of abused and neglected children in the courtroom.
When did CASA begin here in Mohave County?
CASA began in 2008 in Mohave County. It was started by Ron Steffen, who was a concerned citizen, and his wife Karen still carries on his work. She's still one of our CASA volunteers. Another branch of the CASA program is CASA Council. In Mohave County, CASA Council is run by the fantastic Bev Siemens. And if you know Bev, you love Bev. Her and her husband are fierce advocates for the foster children of Mohave County. Bev is a CASA volunteer, and she also is the president of CASA Council. KRMC has also been a huge support to CASA Council. They've supported the superhero event for the last 8 years, and they've also been a T sponsor for the CASA Council charity golf tournament. It's important to understand the role of CASA Council. CASA Council provides for the needs of foster children that DCS might not be able to provide for. For instance, we might have a foster child who has gone into kinship care, and CASA Council is able to provide the funding for that child to receive a football uniform and to participate in football for the season. Or CASA Council might be able to provide for tutoring for a child who is years behind in education. Or they also provide for a girl to get a prom dress and to get a manicure before her senior prom. CASA Council provides for the needs of foster children that DCS is unable to provide for.
Part of what we're going to do is, we hope, gain some interest from listeners because you are looking for CASA volunteers.
Yes, we are actively looking for CASA volunteers. Our program would really benefit from more volunteers.
We'll dig into that in a little bit. What does a CASA volunteer do?
One of their main duties is to advocate for the best interest and safety of the child to the court through writing a court report and through verbal advocacy in the courtroom. They are able to do a lot of things that a DCS caseworker cannot do. DCS caseworkers have so much love for all of the children that they're working with, but they're often assigned to 30 cases at a time. And CASA volunteers are assigned to 1 or 2 cases. So CASA volunteers are really able to give a lot of time and attention to each child and to each child's needs. Another important role of the CASA volunteer is that they are often the one consistent figure who is there for the child throughout the entire dependency. The child might have different DCS caseworkers, they might move foster homes many times, but the CASA volunteer is appointed until the very end of the case. CASA volunteers also are able to very successfully facilitate evaluation and provide support in education, educational disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health needs. So those are some of the things that they do that a CASA volunteer does. They meet with the child once a month, at least once a month. They'll often go to the park or go bowling, or there are some children who love to go to the library. They try to do things with the child that is fun and exciting for them.
CASA volunteers are coordinating. They're speaking with a lot of different people involved in the child's case, including the DCS workers. But in my research for this, one thing that I found interesting was that the CASA volunteer doesn't necessarily have to agree with the DCS worker. That is to say, the CASA volunteer, through his or her research, might have a different perspective.
Correct. So there are many people who are involved in the dependency program. There's an attorney for the child. There's an attorney for each of the parents. There's the DCS caseworker. And all of these different entities involved have different positions that they're required to advocate. The one person who can advocate for the best interest of the child is the CASA volunteer. And occasionally, a DCS caseworker will be required by law or by opinion to advocate for something different than what the CASA volunteer feels is in the best interest of the child.
Many of these children are coming into the court system with very difficult stories, difficult backgrounds. One of the challenges for a CASA volunteer, I think, is to set aside preconceptions. You get a basic understanding of the case that you're going to work on. We all have certain biases. We all have, I think, certain protective instincts when it comes to children. What do you tell your volunteers when it comes to sort of setting aside those preconceptions and digging in on the actual details?
Yes, it's vitally important to be able to do their role well, to be able to be unbiased. If they're unbiased, then they're able to look at the whole case and they're able to ask themselves the next right questions so that they can decide what they think is in the best interest of the child. If they have biases, it's very difficult for them to be able to see around those biases if they're not able to set them on the shelf. We all have biases, obviously, but being aware of them helps us set them on the shelf and look at the entire situation. I had a CASA applicant ask me a couple of days ago. She said that she was really religious, and she asked if that would interfere with her ability to be a CASA volunteer. And I reiterated that many of our volunteers are religious, and many of our volunteers are involved because they're interested in the court system. And the important thing is the ability to be able to look at a case without a bias towards one end result or another and advocate for what is best for the child.
When a CASA volunteer is working on a case, what are some of the possible outcomes?
So when a volunteer is working on a case, there are 3 possible outcomes. One outcome is that the child will be reunified with their biological parents or biological family. Another possible outcome is that the child will be adopted into another family. And then a third outcome is that the child will be placed in a permanent guardianship until they're 18.
Have you ever had a CASA volunteer request to become that permanent guardian, or is that sort of a outside the boundaries of the role?
That's a great question. I've never seen a CASA volunteer who has not cared very, very deeply for the well-being of their children, but it would be outside of their role even if they might wish that they could provide that for the child, they would not do that because of their professional role.
How long does it usually take for a case to reach its conclusion?
I hate to say it depends, but in this, as I've looked at these different cases, it very much depends. A case can reach its conclusion in as little as a few months, or a case can take a few years to reach its conclusion. And sometimes it might look like a case is going to reach its conclusion, and then something will happen to disrupt it, and it will take another couple of years to resolve.
If you're just joining us, this is Focus on Your Health. I'm TG LaFredo, and this week on the program, my guest is Jenn Swapp. She's a coordinator for the CASA program of Mohave County. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. These advocates are everyday people like you and me. They serve as volunteers, working to improve the health, safety, and education of abused and neglected children in Mohave County. If you would like more information on becoming a CASA volunteer, please contact Jenn Swapp at 928-727-4235. That's 928-727-4235, and we'll give that number again later in the program. I've spoken with a few people who have firsthand knowledge of the CASA program. Here is Commissioner Aaron Demke. He's a juvenile court judge in Mohave County, serving the Kingman area.
I like to describe CASA volunteers as the eyes and ears of the court. And as the juvenile court, it's my job to protect children from abuse and neglect and to make sure that they are taken care of, that they have everything they need. And a CASA volunteer are the eyes and ears of my court, in that they are able to go out and interview the child and meet with the children on their level and report back to me on the things that they need and recommendations that they give. Everyone in court has a job to do, and we have parents' attorneys, and we have parents, and we have the children, and we have children's attorneys, and we have mental health providers. And the CASA volunteer really is the only one there who's a complete volunteer, is there because they have no axe to grind. They're merely there just to give their opinion and their advocacy for the best interests of the child. And so a lot of people ask me, how can I make a difference for a child? And I would say to anyone who is considering applying, becoming a CASA, many people want to help. They see the problems that we have in society. They want to help on a local level. They know that there are a lot of children who are dealing with abuse and neglect. There's a lot of families dealing with substance abuse and other forms of abuse and neglect. And some people say, well, I wish I could be a foster parent. I wish I could volunteer with children. I just don't have time to do that. Being a CASA volunteer is an opportunity for you to help with the children in our community without having to become a foster parent or actually have a child in your home, but it's a way for you to meet with children, and they work with you on your own schedule so that you can help and advocate and make a difference. Sometimes we have cases that have a CASA volunteer, and other times we don't. Not every case, we don't have enough volunteers to have one for every case. But when I do have a case with a CASA volunteer, I have the assurance as a juvenile court judge, every time we have a hearing or even in between hearings, I have the assurance of knowing that someone is looking out for that child, that they're not just looking out for themselves or their rules or their policies. As so many people are trying to do, we have one person in there who is looking out merely for the child, who's not being paid to do it. And so as a judge, I have a lot of assurance knowing that those children are being taken care of. They're not the children who fall through the cracks. Their needs are being met, and I know they're being taken care of.
I was also fortunate enough to hear from a young woman who was a CASA kid. She's 18 years old now, an alumna of the program. She gave us permission to share her thoughts on the CASA program. And to preserve her anonymity, I've asked Julya Walters-Koalska, Communications Manager at KRMC, to give voice to these thoughts.
My personal experience with the CASA worker assigned to me was amazing. No matter what, Tanya was always there for me, and she always knew what was best and treated me with so much respect and kindness. CASA had a very positive impact on my life. Even though we knew each other for 5 months, Tanya was there for me as if she had always been there, supporting me from the very start. I believe the CASA program is important because it offers guidance and support that is very much needed for young adults. Going through what I had gone through, I often felt very alone, never heard, until I met with my CASA worker. She helped me voice my feelings and concerns the way I needed to, but I couldn't quite figure out how to on my own.
Here's more with Jenn Swapp.
How many cases do you currently have?
We currently have about 350 plus children in foster care in Mohave County, and that number has decreased significantly over the last several years.
That's an interesting note. Do you have any indication as to why the number is going down?
It's something that we talk about when we have steering committee meetings. We aren't certain of all the specifics. Some of the things that are happening are that there have been legal changes. So there was a law passed this year that DCS will no longer investigate cases where a baby tests positive for marijuana in the hospital when it's born. And previously, DCS would investigate every one of those cases. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I've heard is happening is that because so many children go into foster care outside of Mohave County and have the double trauma of leaving their home, DCS tries very, very hard not to take children out of their home. So it appears, or it seems, that perhaps only the most severe of cases are being investigated.
So we said the numbers are going down, but 350 plus cases, that still sounds like an awful lot. Let me ask a naive question. How could there be so many kids in foster care in Mohave County? What are the factors here?
Children are removed from their home for a variety of reasons. Almost all cases, I would say, this is not a statistic, but I've heard that 95% of cases have substance use in them. But children can be removed due to neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and domestic violence as well.
How much time should a CASA volunteer expect to dedicate to a case?
Our CASA volunteers typically spend about 10 to 20 hours a month on a case. That includes the time that they spend visiting with the child, the time that they spend writing a court report, and the time that they spend communicating with other members of the dependency team.
Where do your volunteers come from? And I mean that professionally, personally.
Yeah, so maybe about 50% of our volunteers are retired, and they're looking for meaningful volunteer work, and they're also looking for connection in our community. The other 50% are working professionals, and most of our volunteers are women at this time, although we are onboarding right now a couple of fantastic men. We are really in need of male volunteers. I recently have been reading a book written by Richard Reeves, who is the author of Boys and Men, and he addresses how our boys are failing in education, in the workplace, in their homes. And of particular interest to him is that our boys in foster care appear to be at the greatest risk. He compared them to orchids, which flower beautifully, but are very fragile and require a lot of care and attention. And our boys really benefit from having male mentors that they can turn to, that they can trust, and that they can look to as an example. You can see marked differences between the children who have CASA volunteers and the children who don't. This is a program that makes a huge, lasting, perhaps even lifelong difference in the lives of these children.
What makes a good volunteer?
Well, as we talked a little bit about this earlier, being able to set aside biases and prejudice and advocate well for the best interest of the child. CASA volunteers are able to meet with all of the dependency program and work well with them. But I would say if anyone is concerned about their ability to become a successful volunteer, the most important thing is their ability to ask the next right question. There doesn't have to be a solution at the outset. It really takes someone who cares about the child and who sticks with it and then always asks the next right question of what's in the best interest of this child and how can we get there as quickly as possible.
I know you and the CASA volunteers are making differences in the lives of these kids. At the same time, you're hearing a lot of difficult stories. I wonder how you, just on a personal level, I wonder how you deal with that.
When I considered this job, many people said that it would be too hard of a job to deal with emotionally, and it did give me pause in considering that. But as I thought about it, and as I've come to see, many professions deal with the hard parts of life every day. My husband is a physician at KRMC, and he diagnoses untimely cancer on a daily basis. There's a lot of meaning to be found in the struggle with life and death and with fairness and inequality. But we all find meaning in life when we can see the power that we have to affect change in our small circle. And that's something that I remind myself of on a daily basis. The other thing that I do and that we train our volunteers to do is to have practical checks and balances in place to deal with both the hard parts and also to celebrate the victories. Every year we have an adoption day, and then about 6 months later we have a reunification day. And those are days that the judges, the attorneys, everyone in the dependency program celebrates these small victories that have happened in the lives of these children and families.
Jenn, how does someone go about becoming a CASA volunteer?
Anyone can go to our website. It's www.azcourts.gov, or you can Google CASA of Mohave County. You can apply there online. The application includes bio and references. The onboarding process includes a meet and greet. There's an abbreviated polygraph, fingerprints, and then an interview with me or with my colleague Madeline. And there's also 30 hours of training that will teach you everything that you need to know to be a very successful and professional CASA volunteer. It's provided by the state CASA program, and it's very well done. But anyone who has any questions can always contact me and call me, and I would love to talk with them more about the program as well.
You want to give out a number for that?
I do.
I dare you.
My phone number is 928-727-4235.
727-4235 to speak with Jenn Swapp.
So the onboarding process takes a little bit of time, and it's because this is a very professional volunteer position. It doesn't mean that you have to be a professional. It just means that you're advocating in court and you're writing court reports. And the process of onboarding helps you learn the things that you need to learn so that you can be successful at this position. Some of our CASA volunteers have been attorneys. They've had their deans of universities. And some of our CASA volunteers have been stay-at-home moms and everywhere in between, and they are all equally important and equally good at their job.
That's Jenn Swapp, a coordinator for CASA of Mohave County. And if you are interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, or if you'd just like more information on the program, you can reach her at 928-727-4235. That's 928-727-4235. Special thanks to Commissioner Aaron Demke and Julya Walters-Koalska for their contributions to this episode. I'm TG LaFredo. That's Focus on Your Health. Stay healthy, and we'll catch you next time.